Haiti. She is Africa's eldest daughter. She is the recipient of abominable French, Spanish, and British persecution and oppression. In the late 18th century, her skin was dark and rich, but bore centuries of trauma from a slave trade that saw death, inhumanity, barbarism, and destroyed families in the name of profit. Prior to the Haitian Revolution, what is now known as Haiti was a French colony located in the Caribbean called Saint-Domingue. In the 18th century, trade between North American colonies and Saint-Domingue flourished, and it quickly became a staple among North American merchants. Consequently, Saint-Domingue became an economic powerhouse, causing the import of African slaves to be primarily aimed at Caribbean colonies. With a massive influx of enslaved Africans to the Caribbean, a demographic reality of primarily Africans was established in Saint-Domingue, which eventually became a key factor in the 1804 Haitian Revolution. In addition to a demographic reality, the French Revolution, which began in 1789, also had a major effect on the Caribbean colonies. It inspired the white minority of Saint-Domingue to divide into royalist and nationalist factions, while the mixed-race population championed for civil rights. Realizing an opportunity presented itself within the midst of a separate human rights movement, the enslaved of northern Saint-Domingue mobilized and orchestrated a huge uprising that began on August 22, 1791. When word of the slave rebellion broke out, American leaders raced to protect the white population of Saint-Domingue. However, the state of affairs became much more complicated when French civil commissioners sent to Saint-Domingue persuaded one of the founders of the slave rebellion, Toussaint Louverture, that the new French government was committed to ending slavery. Over the next 13 years, from 1791 to 1804, Haiti would battle France, Britain, and Spain to gain its independence, and would eventually become the first republic in the world to end slavery. In terms of American involvement in the Haitian Revolution, President and slave owner Thomas Jefferson supported the suppression of the Haitian Rebellion and sided with French forces. He also recommended that Saint-Domingue slave owners attempted a settlement comparable to Jamaican slave owners, who would come to an agreement with groups of escaping slaves in 1739. In addition to sabotaging Haitian resistance efforts and an attempt to prevent a possible American slave revolt, Thomas Jefferson actively worked to politically isolate Haiti. Jefferson became even more hostile after Louverture's replacement, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who ordered the execution of all the whites in Haiti left, after Napoleonic efforts to reconquer Saint-Domingue and re-establish slavery. Nevertheless, in a series of gruesome battles that saw a death toll of at least 300,000 people, Haiti went on to win its independence from France in 1804. It became the second sovereign nation in the Americas and the first free black country. Thomas Jefferson declined to recognize Haitian independence, a notion that U.S. Federalists agreed with. Ensuing the historic victory over France, African music, religion, language, philosophy, and political ideologies were all reformulated in Haiti. As well as that, Haiti drafted a Declaration of Independence. All seemed to be well, until the Haitian Declaration of Independence was not politically acknowledged by other countries until 1825. Then, in 1825, the French government forced Haiti to pay compensation for French plantation owners who had lost property during the Haitian Revolution. Those reparations, which forced Haiti to pay a recurring debt of a U.S. equivalent $21 billion over the course of 200 years, have since levied Haiti and forced them to borrow from French banks, adding even more to their enormous debt. Along with an outrageous debt to pay, Haiti fell victim to an international trade boycott. Other countries refused to purchase Haitian goods nor trade with Haiti, which propelled the once promising nation into an economic collapse. However, in defiance of economic despair, Haiti managed to display flashes of promise and prosperity in the late 19th century. Unfortunately, misfortune continued to plague Haiti when the U.S. occupation and invasion of Haiti, which lasted from 1915 to 1934, depleted Haiti of all of its remaining economic resources. With little hope left for Haiti, things took a turn for the absolute worst when a succession of totalitarian leaders assumed power. Headed by Francois, nicknamed Papa Doc Duvalier, and his son, Jean-Claude, nicknamed Baby Doc Duvalier, The two successive leaders devastated Haiti's economy and tortured and brutally killed hundreds of thousands of Haitians. Following Baby Doc's reign, which abruptly ended in 1986, poor leadership and natural disasters have led to Haiti becoming one of the poorest nations in the world. An amalgamation of debt, violence, political exploitation, and natural disasters have caused Haiti to be the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Now, Haiti continues to suffer from those same problems, as well as social unrest, a kidnapping epidemic, and COVID-19. Haiti believed Black Lives Mattered before the world would, and paid dearly for forging the trailblazing idea. No one exalts Haiti today for giving the modern world the blueprint of freedom from slavery. Today, we have forgotten Haiti's achievement. How remarkable that slaves would demand their freedom and succeed. The Haitian Revolution pushed the idea of universalism to the forefront of society, and Haiti deserves to be recognized for that.